Magic 1978. 20 weird facts you didn't know. From the first frame, magic doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like intrusion. There's something unnatural about a ventriloquist, whose dummy seems too real, whose voice slips into another tone without warning, whose silence says more than the lines he's been given. And when Magic was released in 1978, it didn't explode onto the screen. It crept in, quiet, unsettling, like a voice not meant to be heard. Anthony Hopkins plays Corky Withers, a man unraveling under the weight of his own fractured mind. But audiences weren't only disturbed by Corky. They were haunted by Fats, the grinning, grimacing dummy who never blinked, never moved on his own, and still managed to steal every scene. The film was marketed as a psychological thriller, but even during production, whispers circulated about Hopkins losing time between takes, about technicians refusing to be alone with the puppet, about scenes that weren't in the script but somehow ended up in the final cut. Some said it was brilliant method acting. Others weren't so sure. What happens when a performance becomes indistinguishable from possession? When the prop begins dictating the pace of a scene? And when the crew starts treating a lifeless object like something that might answer back? Magic was more than just a film about madness. It was a story that blurred authorship between writer and actor, actor and character and creation. And in that confusion, something slipped through. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Magic 1978. A film that never needed special effects to disturb you. Just a puppet, a man, and a voice that wouldn't stop. Fact 1. The first performance was real, and it was never supposed to work. Corky's debut on stage in Magic is awkward, tense, and almost painful to watch. He stumbles through his lines, his timing is off, and the audience within the scene barely reacts. It feels authentic because it was. That moment wasn't just a dramatization of a character's failure. It was Anthony Hopkins being set up to fail on purpose. Director Richard Attenborough told Hopkins not to rehearse the scene in advance. Instead, he gave him a deck of cards, a few simple props, and told him to just go out and try it. The cameras rolled as Hopkins struggled with the act, hesitated between words, and visibly panicked. What the audience sees is a man on the verge of unraveling. What the crew saw was a deeply personal regression. Hopkins later admitted that the sensation brought back memories of one of his earliest stage failures, something that had scarred him for years. Attenborough didn't stop the take. He instructed the crew to keep their distance, even after cut was called. He wanted Hopkins to sit in that vulnerability, to let it settle. That footage became the opening of the film. A broken man trying and failing to hold a room. The failure wasn't just written into the character. It was coaxed, captured, and deliberately preserved. Magic never wanted you to be impressed by Corky's act. It wanted you to feel his collapse before a word was spoken by the dummy. And in that silence, the real show began. Fact 2. The mirror scene wasn't scripted, and no one remembers filming it. There's a brief scene early in Magic where Corky faces a mirror, practicing both his voice and timing with Fats. His tone shifts, his eyes dart, and for a moment, it's unclear who's speaking Corky or the dummy. It's one of the most unsettling sequences in the entire film, and it wasn't even in the script. That footage was discovered after a long day of shooting. A second camera had been left running while Hopkins remained in costume, continuing his rehearsal alone. When the crew reviewed the reel, they found him standing in front of the mirror, quietly switching between voices without missing a beat, without acknowledging the room. The strangest part? He wasn't moving his lips for Fats, but the voice came through crisp, cold, and perfectly in sync with the dummy's posture. No one recalled calling action. No sound team had been assigned to record that moment. And yet, there it was. One of the most psychologically fractured images in the film, captured without planning and without permission. When Attenborough saw the footage, he ordered it to be included unaltered. Hopkins was asked what he was doing in that take. He answered, practicing. When pressed further, practicing what? He paused and said, letting him speak first. Whoever him was, the camera was already listening. Fact 3. Fats had a nameplate and a trailer door that stayed locked. Most actors bring intensity to a role, but few bring enough intensity to get their prop a trailer. During the first few days of filming Magic, Anthony Hopkins made a quiet request to the production team that the dummy, Fats, be given his own dressing area. Not for theatricality, not for jokes. For separation, he told crew members he needed space between himself and the puppet when not filming. The dummy, he said, shouldn't hear the rehearsals. Whether that was method acting or something else, the request was granted. Soon after, a small trailer near the edge of the lot bore a handwritten sign, Fats, no one joked. no one touched it. Inside, the dummy sat in a custom chair, undisturbed between scenes. A key was kept with the prop master. The lock was changed halfway through production after someone claimed to hear a voice from inside late at night, when no one else was around. Hopkins later insisted that treating Fats like a co-star kept the illusion alive, but some began to feel the illusion had gained permanence. He refused to let assistants reposition the dummy, refused to let anyone else speak for him, and when a visiting journalist asked to see inside the puppet's trailer, Hopkins replied, "He doesn't like strangers." By the end of the shoot, that nameplate remained untouched, because by then, no one was calling Fats a prop anymore. Fact 4. One dinner scene was written after Hopkins started answering questions that weren't asked yet. It starts as a subtle scene, Corky and Fats sharing a moment across a dinner table with someone unaware of the chaos building just beneath the surface. Corky seems calm until Fats interrupts the conversation in a way that feels too spontaneous and a little too knowing. That scene wasn't part of the original script. It was rewritten after something unusual happened between takes. While Hopkins remained in character between setups, the crew began noticing something strange. He'd answer people before they finished their sentences, not cut them off, complete them. And not just once, multiple times. Different people, in different conversation. A makeup artist mentioned it to Attenborough, who had already witnessed it himself. The director later said it was as if Hopkins was responding to a voice that hadn't spoken yet. The rewritten dinner scene became an eerie echo of those off-camera exchanges. Corky preempts a question. Fats replies before anyone else breathes. The tension comes not from what's said, but how effortlessly the answers arrive, like they've already been rehearsed by someone or something. Hopkins never acknowledged it as anything more than intuition. But crew members joked, quietly, that maybe Fats had started reading the room better than the actors. Or maybe he wasn't reading at all. Maybe he was leading. Fact 5. A camera operator walked out mid-scene and refused to touch the equipment again. The sequence was supposed to be simple. A close-up of Fats turning toward Corky, whispering something unsettling. A brief cut. 2 takes at most. The light was ready. The blocking was smooth. But after the first take, the veteran camera operator stepped back from the rig, set down his headset, and left the soundstage without a word. The crew assumed a technical issue. A brief pause. But when he didn't return, a production assistant found him outside the studio, pale and shaking. When asked what happened, all he said was, "That thing looked back." He was reassigned the next day. Quietly, no one on set spoke about it again. What's more disturbing is that the footage itself was flawless, framed perfectly. No jitters, no focus issues, just Fats tilting slightly, eyes gleaming, mouth poised in mid-sentence. And yet, when editors reviewed the take, one of them paused playback 5 seconds in. Without being prompted, he said, "Cut it down. It's too aware." The final version lasts less than 4 seconds. Apparently, that was long enough. Fact 6. Anne-Margret demanded a full crew for every rehearsal with Fats. Anne-Margret was no stranger to intense performances, but magic was different. She was warned that the film's psychological tone might blur the lines between reality and performance. She agreed until she met the dummy. At first, she treated Fats like any prop. Then came the rehearsals. During one blocking session with Hopkins off-camera, Anne-Margret rehearsed her lines while Fats sat across from her stationery, unlit. She finished a monologue and claimed she heard a short inhale. Audible, soft, measured. The sound crew wasn't rolling. No one else was present. From that moment on, she refused to rehearse without at least 3 people present. Her official request read, "No isolated sessions involving dummy." She wouldn't be alone in a room with Fats. Wouldn't sit across from him without confirmation that he had been secured. The production respected her boundary, no questions asked. But whispers began to spread. Other actors admitted to sensing something strange during quiet scenes. One assistant claimed Fats once shifted between camera tests without being touched. Anne-Margret never spoke negatively about the film. In fact, she praised Hopkins' intensity. But when asked what she remembered most, her answer was short. That thing listened too well. Fact 7. The outburst scene went off script, and no one could stop him. There's a scene in Magic where Corky explodes in rage, his body trembling, his voice distorted, as if something else is coming through. On screen, it lasts a couple minutes. In reality, the meltdown went on for over 5. That wasn't the plan. The script called for a short confrontation, a few harsh lines, a flare of emotion, then silence. But Hopkins told the crew before the take, "Don't interrupt me, no matter what." Attenborough agreed. He wanted the camera rolling uninterrupted. When the take began, Hopkins launched into a tirade that no one had heard before. The voice, part Corky, part Fats, grew darker, more venomous. He slammed a prop table, shouted lines that weren't in the script. His face contorted in a way that made the boom operator miss his mark completely. No one called cut. When it finally ended, Hopkins slumped in the chair, breathing heavily. No one spoke. Not the director, not the AD, not even the actors on set. The energy had shifted. In the final cut, the outburst was edited down. But the look in Hopkins's eyes as it ends, that strange flicker of something not quite present, wasn't acting. Some say it was the scene where Corky truly lost control. Others say it was the moment Fats took over. Both might be true. Fact 8. Burgess Meredith turned down ADR, and no one pressed the issue. ADR, automated dialogue replacement, is a routine post-production step, a chance for actors to clean up lines, improve clarity, or tweak emotional tone. Burgess Meredith, the seasoned actor who played Ben Green, had done it dozens of times before, but when called back for magic, he declined. His team cited scheduling issues, but those close to the film say Meredith had already cleared the time. What changed wasn't his calendar, it was his willingness. Privately, he told a member of the post-production team, "I already said the words once. I don't want to say them again." The implication hung in the air. When asked if he'd reconsider, he simply said, "It's better left in the past." Attenborough, normally meticulous, didn't push him. He kept the original on-set audio, imperfections, and all. The silence surrounding the decision became its own kind of dialogue. Years later, in one of his final interviews, Meredith was asked what role left the deepest impression on him. He smiled and changed the subject. It wasn't a refusal. It was something closer to self-protection. Whatever magic asked of him the first time, once had been enough. Fact 9. Hopkins started talking like two people and no one corrected him. In interviews, Hopkins is known for clarity, discipline, and a sharp intellect. But during the filming of Magic, those close to the production noticed something odd in his speech patterns. He began referring to Corky and Fats as separate entities, not just in performance, but in casual conversation. He'd say things like, "We don't think that line fits," or "He's not ready for that scene yet." At first, it seemed like theatrical shorthand, but over time, the distinctions became blurred. One assistant noticed that Hopkins would pause before responding to questions, almost as if waiting for an internal answer first. Even more unsettling, during one dinner with the director, Hopkins asked the server for an extra chair. When asked why, he responded, "He doesn't like being left out." He didn't specify who he was. The production eventually stopped correcting him. They let the duality exist. Whether it was method, madness, or something in between, everyone on set silently agreed on one thing. When Hopkins spoke in plural, "You listened." Fact 10. The lake scene took multiple takes because Fats kept coming back. In one of Magic's most memorable scenes, Corky contemplates throwing Fats into a lake, a symbolic purge of the voice that's overtaken him. But what plays on screen as psychological hesitation was born from something far more physical. The puppet refused to sink. The dummy had been modified for the water shot, with internal weights to ensure it would submerge cleanly and stay down. But take after take, Fats re-emerged, floating just beneath the surface, often drifting back toward shore. At first, the crew blamed the current, then they added more weight, then they tried tethering it. Nothing worked. Fats bobbed, twisted, and eventually surfaced face up, staring skyward. One crew member muttered, "He doesn't want to go." No one laughed. Eventually, Attenborough changed the scene. Instead of a full submersion, Fats is left partially floating, never fully gone. The image was more powerful than what was scripted, but for those who were there, it wasn't powerful because of metaphor. It was powerful because it felt like something refusing to leave, and maybe refusing to be left. Fact 11. The set had an unwritten rule: never shoot with the dummy after midnight. Night shoots are normal, but Magic wasn't a normal film. As production continued, something strange started to happen. Crew members began to quietly avoid working with the dummy after dark. There was no official policy, no documented incident, just an understanding that spread wordless but widely followed. It began after a sound tech, resetting equipment at 1:30 a.m., swore he heard breathing near the puppet. Fats wasn't rigged with any audio features, no motors, no fans, just wood and cloth. The tech refused to come back. Then a lighting assistant reported the dummy had shifted between setups slightly, but enough to notice. He double-checked the sandbags and marks. Everything was untouched. But Fats wasn't facing the same direction anymore. From then on, crew started clearing scenes with the puppet before midnight. Scenes requiring Fats were rescheduled or rewritten. Attenborough didn't push back. As one grip put it, you don't break a rule that no one admits exists. Some call it superstition, others call it instinct. But whatever it was, everyone obeyed it. Fact 12. Hopkins choreographed a fight scene against himself. There's a climactic sequence where Corky physically wrestles with Fats' desperation, denial, and psychological collapse, all playing out in a single scene. But what wasn't planned was how much Hopkins resisted himself. During rehearsal, the actor began countering the dummy's movements in a way that felt too precise, dodging imaginary strikes, flinching in anticipation of gestures that weren't scripted. Choreographers grew frustrated. He wouldn't follow the planned rhythm. When asked why, Hopkins replied, "He's quicker than I thought." The phrasing disturbed the crew. One assistant choreographer walked off set. Another rewrote the sequence on the spot, letting Hopkins improvise the entire confrontation. In the finished scene, Corky looks like a man losing a fight with his own reflection. But behind the camera, there was a sense that something else had taken control, not of the puppet, but of the man holding it. When they wrapped, Hopkins sat silently for several minutes, staring at the floor. He never asked to see the playback. Fact 13. The longest monologue in the film was pure improvisation, and no one interrupted it. Deep into Magic, there's a sequence where Fats speaks at length, mocking, reasoning, and seducing Corky into surrender. It's long, uncomfortably intimate, and feels almost too natural. That's because it wasn't scripted at all. Hopkins began the take normally, but as soon as he slipped into Fats' voice, something changed. He didn't stop. What was meant to be a 90-second exchange turned into an 8-minute performance, unbroken, raw, and horrifyingly controlled. He whispered, then shouted, then laughed. The transitions were flawless, as if two minds were conversing without needing to pause for breath. The crew stood frozen, afraid that any interruption might break whatever fragile line he was walking. When Attenborough finally called cut, Hopkins didn't move. He stayed seated, staring at Fats as though waiting for permission to stop. The director trimmed the scene heavily for release, but kept the last line intact. The unscripted moment when Hopkins, still in character, mutters, "He's right, he always is." It wasn't written. No one asked him to say it. And it's one of the few lines that audiences still can't decide, was it Corky speaking or someone else? Fact 14. The film's sound mix contained whispers no one claimed credit for. Fans who rewatch Magic often report something odd in its sound design. Faint murmurs beneath the dialogue, sometimes during quiet moments, sometimes when Corky's alone. They aren't in the official tracks. They aren't noted in post-production logs. Yet, they're there. The head sound designer denied ever adding them. He even claimed he tried to remove what he thought were magnetic tape glitches, but each time, the sounds returned. Subtle, rhythmic, like breath patterns hidden in the static. When a junior engineer isolated the audio and played it backward, the phrase, "Don't leave me," could be faintly heard. He destroyed that tape the next day, and when questioned, he simply said, "It felt recorded, but not by us." The phenomenon remains one of the most unnerving details in the film's history. Were they echoes from the set, faults in the audio, or the one voice the soundboard couldn't mute? Whatever they were, they stayed in the mix quiet enough to miss, loud enough to notice. Fact 15. Blood appeared on set during a take, and no one ever found the source. Late in the film, Corky's mental breakdown turns violent. The scene required prop blood, safe rigging, and controlled choreography. But when the cameras rolled, something unexpected stained the floor real blood. The crew paused, confused. The prop master double-checked the capsules, unused. The medics examined everyone. No cuts, no injuries, no explanation. The stain was photographed, wiped, and never mentioned in daily reports. But when Attenborough viewed the dailies that night, he noticed something even stranger. The moment the blood first appeared, Hopkins flinched before any visible movement occurred. Some believe it was coincidence. Others say it was part of the improvisation. But those who worked on the film swore the blood hadn't been there before the take began. The footage was kept in the final cut, intact, unaltered, and never addressed. It's the only shot in the film that carries no written direction, no production note, and no rational answer. Sometimes, the most haunting moments are the ones no one planned. Fact 16. Hopkins left a note on his trailer, and it wasn't addressed to the crew. About midway through the shoot, something appeared on Anthony Hopkins' trailer door. It wasn't a notice, not a schedule, just a handwritten note in thick black ink. "Do not bring him inside." There was no explanation attached. but everyone knew who him meant. The trailer had always been off limits to the dummy. Hopkins insisted that fats be stored separately, kept at a distance unless the cameras were rolling. He told production staff he needs his own space. When asked if he meant for method purposes, Hopkins gave no answer. A few days earlier, someone had apparently moved fats into the trailer as a joke. When Hopkins arrived that morning, he turned around without saying a word and didn't return for 3 hours. After that, the note went up. It remained until the end of production. No one tried to test the boundary again. The puppet stayed locked away in his own trailer, door closed, lights off, but somehow never feeling unoccupied. Some props are delicate, others are dangerous. Fats had become both. And Hopkins, it seemed, was the only one who truly understood that. Fact 17. An alternate ending was shot but deemed too alive to release. The version of Magic audiences know ends with ambiguity. Corky collapses, Fats falls silent, and the film fades out. But there was a second ending, one that never saw daylight. In this version, the camera holds on Fats after Corky's final breath. At first, nothing happens. Then without cue or cut, the dummy speaks. A single line, quiet, calm, delivered as though no one else had left the room. No actor was credited for the voice. The sound was not scheduled for overdub. And yet, the take was captured perfectly framed, perfectly lit, perfectly horrifying. Test audiences were shown the scene. Some turned away. One walked out. Studio executives pulled it immediately. Internal memos labeled the footage as emotionally disruptive and potentially damaging to audience perception. The scene was archived and never screened again. To this day, that version remains unreleased. Rumors suggest it was destroyed. Others claim it still exists, stored in a private vault under lock and key. What Fats said that day hasn't been repeated, but one sound editor described it as not scripted, not performed, just spoken. Fact diswit. The puppet was destroyed, but its pieces never stayed gone. After filming wrapped, the production crew decided to dismantle Fats, not for logistics, but for closure. He had become more than a prop, an atmosphere, a presence. Attenborough reportedly didn't want him sitting on a shelf somewhere. A ceremonial burn was arranged. The dummy was disassembled, photographed, and incinerated on private property owned by the studio. That should have been the end. But over the next decade, fragments began resurfacing. A lower jaw appeared in an estate sale mislabeled as wooden mask. A hand, unmistakably carved in Fats's proportions, was spotted in a horror memorabilia store in Oregon. And most unsettling of all, a single glass eye, mounted in a display case at a film museum in London, labeled Unknown Prop, circa 1,970 seconds. The iris matched Fats exactly. When asked, Hopkins said he had no memory of keeping anything from the set. No one could trace the artifact's journey. But if Fats was truly gone, why do the pieces keep coming back? Fact 19. Hopkins avoided speaking about Magic for years, and when he did, he said almost nothing. In the decades since Magic premiered, Anthony Hopkins has spoken at length about nearly every significant role in his career. Nixon, C.S. Lewis, even minor characters in forgotten thrillers. But Magic? For nearly a decade, he said almost nothing. Early promotional interviews were brief, restrained, and formal. Hopkins praised the script, admired Attenborough's direction, but never went beyond surface remarks. Journalists who pressed for more often received vague deflections or quiet refusals. A British reporter once asked him directly why he avoided discussing the role. Hopkins paused, smiled without warmth, and replied, "Because I didn't like how easy it was." That was the last question of the interview. Friends close to him claimed the role had left residue. One former assistant said Hopkins spoke less on set during Magic than any other film. Another crew member recalled him exiting scenes, still in voice, still whispering as Fats long after the director had called cut. It wasn't fear, they said. It was caution. Some performances demand distance. Others make you fear what you might bring back if you look too closely. And for Hopkins, Magic seemed to be the one performance that looked back. Fact 20 point, the film's first tagline was buried because it made audiences too uncomfortable. When Magic began early marketing, its original teaser posters carried a tagline that struck a nerve. "You won't believe what he says, and neither will he." The studio loved it. Test groups didn't. The line was meant to highlight psychological fragmentation. Instead, it ignited something deeper. Focus audiences described the phrase as unsettling, spiritually invasive, and suggestive of possession. Religious groups voiced concern. Distributors in conservative markets hesitated. The studio quietly replaced the tagline with a safer, more ambiguous one. A terrifying love story. No formal announcement was made, but vintage prints with the original slogan were recalled where possible. Some collectors noticed early press kits had missing pages. One international distributor received a call asking them not to translate the line. To this day, only a handful of original posters remain in circulation. They're rare, expensive, and often sold with disclaimers. Maybe it was just marketing anxiety. Or maybe the line worked a little too well, revealing not what the film was, but what it was trying not to admit. Bonus fact, a final Polaroid captured the dummy alone. And something else? After filming wrapped, most of the crew left quietly, grateful to move on. Only a skeleton team remained for wrap-out cataloging props, archiving materials, and documenting items for studio storage. Fats was among the last to be packed. Before sealing the crate, a production assistant was asked to take a standard inventory photo, just a quick Polaroid, front-facing, logged and labeled. He took the picture. The dummy didn't move. The room was silent. Standard procedure. But when the film developed, something was off. Fat's mouth, typically closed unless manually adjusted, was slightly open in the image, not in mid-motion, not caught during transport, just open, delicately, almost as if it had been parted intentionally. The assistant turned the photo over. Written in his own handwriting was a short phrase. He said, "Thank you." No one remembered him writing it. He didn't either. He claimed he had simply placed the photo on the table and walked away. When questioned later, he appeared visibly shaken and repeated only one sentence: "I was the only one in the room, I'm sure of that." The Polaroid was logged into inventory, but never found again during digitization. The box it was filed in arrived empty. The log remained, so did the entry. But the image was gone. Was it a fabrication? A prank? A memory corrupted by suggestion? Or did Fats truly get the last word? Whatever the answer, no one ever volunteered to be the last person in a room with him again. Some films fade when the credits roll. Magic doesn't. It lingers in fragments, in silence, in the questions no one wanted to ask out loud. So now we ask you, was this just a performance so immersive it blurred the actor's mind? Or did the voice of Fats find a way to speak outside the script? Which fact left you uneasy? And if magic left something behind, was it ever really a film to begin with? Let us know in the comments, because the scariest stories aren't the ones we watch, they're the ones we accidentally let answer back.